The swamp planet Zephyr 7 was covered in thick jungles, endless rivers, and misty marshlands. Strange creatures roamed the land, some with glowing eyes, others with scales as strong as steel. The Sci-Fi, a proud and ancient reptilian species, ruled over this world. They were tall, covered in green and blue scales, with sharp claws and even sharper minds. They believed they were the only true intelligence in the universe. Among them was Scifi, a young female Zephyr who had always felt different from the others. The Zephyr were supposed to be strong, emotionless, and loyal to their leaders, but Scifi often felt things she could not explain. She had dreams of strange figures, tall beings with soft skin, expressive eyes, and voices that spoke in a language she did not understand. She told no one about these dreams. If the elders found out, they would say she was broken, that her mind was weak. But the dreams felt real. One evening, while Scifi was gathering supplies near the river, she heard the sound of engines roaring above the trees. A shadow passed over the water as a starship landed in the distance. The Sci-Fi rarely had visitors, and when they did, it was usually traders or diplomats from other species. But this ship was different. It was not like the smooth, dark ships of the Sci-Fi. It was older, rusted in places, and carried the markings of an unknown world. The elders ordered the people to stay away, but Scifi was too curious. She moved through the dense forest, stepping carefully over the wet ground, until she reached the landing site. A single figure stood outside the ship, dressed in armor that had seen many battles. He was not Sci-Fi. His body was covered in strange clothing, his skin was pale, and his eyes were unlike anything she had ever seen. They were human eyes. The Sci-Fi warriors surrounded the man, their weapons drawn. The stranger did not reach for a weapon. Instead, he raised his hand slowly, showing he meant no harm. His voice was deep and calm. "I'm not here to fight," he said. "I'm looking for someone." The elders stepped forward, their golden robes shimmering in the dim light. "Who are you?" one of them demanded. The man smiled slightly. "My name is Ethan Voss," he said, "and I have come for her." He pointed at Scifi. Gasps filled the air. The Sci-Fi warriors tensed, ready to strike if necessary. Scifi's heart pounded in her chest. "Me?" she asked, confused. "I don't even know you." Ethan studied her carefully. His expression was not one of anger or aggression. It was something else. Recognition. "You don't remember me," he said softly, "but I remember you." The elders turned to Scifi. "This is a trick," they hissed. "You are Sci-Fi. This outsider speaks lies." But Scifi was no longer sure. Why did the sight of this man feel familiar? Why did his voice stir something inside her that she couldn't explain? Ethan reached into a small pouch and pulled out a holographic device. He pressed a button, and suddenly, a glowing image appeared in the air. It was a human child. She had golden hair, bright eyes, and a wide smile. She was laughing, reaching out toward something beyond the camera. Scifi felt dizzy. "This was you," Ethan said, "a long time ago." "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "That's impossible. I was born here. I have always been Sci-Fi." Ethan looked at her, his face full of sadness. "That's what they told you," he said, "but it's not the truth." The Sci-Fi elders roared in anger. "Enough. This is nonsense. He is an intruder, and he has poisoned your mind with falsehoods." The guards grabbed Ethan's arms, forcing him to his knees. Scifi should have felt relief that the threat was being dealt with. Instead, she felt something else. Fear, not fear of the human, but fear of what he had just told her. Because deep down, she knew he wasn't lying. The Sci-Fi warriors tightened their grip on Ethan, their sharp claws digging into his skin. Scifi watched, frozen, as the tension in the air grew thicker. She could hear the sounds of the swamp, distant birds calling, the rustle of leaves. Yet the world around her felt strangely quiet. Scifi's thoughts raced. She wanted to speak, to ask Ethan more questions, but the words wouldn't come. The image of the human child, the child that was supposed to be her, kept playing in her mind. She saw the smiling face, the bright golden hair, and the innocence in those eyes. "Let him go," she said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. The Sci-Fi warriors looked at her, surprised. The elders stepped forward, their eyes narrowing in disbelief. "What did you say?" one of them demanded. "I said, let him go," she repeated, her voice growing stronger. There was something inside her now, something pushing her to act, to speak the truth she had always buried deep down. Scifi took a step toward the group, her claws twitching at her sides. She didn't know what was happening to her, but she knew she had to do something. "This man, he's not lying. He knows me. I don't understand how, but I feel it. I feel like I've known him for a very long time." The elders stared at her in shock. "You've been influenced by this human," one of them hissed. "He is a threat to the purity of our race." "No," Scifi said firmly, stepping closer to Ethan. "He's not a threat. He's trying to help me remember something." Ethan looked at her with a mix of relief and sadness. "You're starting to remember, Scifi," he said softly. "Your name isn't Scifi. It's Elena." The name echoed in her mind, but it felt foreign. Elena. It sounded like her, but it didn't make sense. She had always been Scifi. She was Zifar. Yet the more she thought about it, the more Elena felt like a part of her, a part she had locked away for too long. "I don't understand," Scifi whispered. "What happened to me?" Ethan sighed deeply. "You were human, Elena. You were born on Earth, just like me. You were a child when you were brought here, but something happened to you. Something terrible." Before Scifi could ask him what he meant, the Sci-Fi elders moved quickly. "Enough of this," one of them roared. "You have defiled the mind of one of our own. You will be dealt with." They lunged at Ethan, their claws ready to strike, but Scifi's instincts kicked in. Without thinking, she leaped in front of Ethan, blocking the warrior's path. "Stop," she shouted, her voice ringing through the air. "I won't let you hurt him. Not anymore." The warriors hesitated. Scifi could see the confusion and anger in their eyes, but something else was there too, a flicker of doubt. She had never stood against the Sci-Fi like this. They were her people, her family, her world. But now she wasn't sure where she belonged. "Let us leave," Ethan said calmly. "Take us to a safe place, and we'll talk. There's more you need to understand." For a long moment, there was only silence. The Sci-Fi elders exchanged glances, their minds torn between their loyalty to tradition and the growing unease they felt in Scifi's actions. Finally, the eldest warrior spoke. "We will not allow this betrayal," he said coldly. "But you may leave. For now, do not think that this will go unnoticed." With a sharp motion, he gestured for the others to step aside. The path was clear. Scifi turned to Ethan. "We can go?" she asked, her voice uncertain. Ethan nodded, his face full of determination. "Yes, we can go, but there's a lot you need to know, Elena. Your past, it's not what you've been told." Scifi, no, Elena, felt a surge of emotion. The name felt more natural now, like a lost memory that was starting to return. She didn't know if she could trust Ethan completely, but he seemed to know things no one else did. As they walked away from the Sci-Fi warriors, Scifi felt the weight of her past pressing down on her. She didn't understand what had happened to her, but she knew she couldn't ignore it any longer. She had to know the truth. The journey took them deep into the swamps, far away from the eyes of the Sci-Fi. As the mist thickened around them, Ethan spoke again. "Your story begins long before you came here, Elena. Long before you were Scifi." Scifi, or Elena, felt her heart race. "What do you mean?" Ethan hesitated. "You were part of a war between your people, humans, and the Sci-Fi. You were part of a mission, a peace mission, but things went wrong. You were taken, and they changed you." Elena stopped walking, her mind spinning. What are you saying? The Sci-Fi. They did this to me. Ethan nodded. Yes, but it's not as simple as that. You were never meant to be their soldier. You were meant to be something else. Elena looked at him, her mind clouded with more questions than answers. But she knew one thing for sure. Her life, her identity, was not what she had believed. And she had to find out why. The journey through the thick swamps of HFY was not an easy one. The air was thick with mist, and the ground was soft, making every step feel heavier. Shothic, Elena now, walked alongside Ethan, still unsure of the path that lay before her. She felt like she was walking through a fog, both in the swamp and in her mind. The more she heard about her past, the more questions grew. And with each step, her memory felt like it was pulling her in two different directions. One that had always been familiar, the other foreign but painfully close. As they walked deeper into the wilderness, Ethan spoke quietly, explaining the history that had been hidden from her. He told her about the human mission that had been sent to HFY many years ago, about the peace efforts that had been shattered by war, and about the strange, twisted experiments that had followed. You were a child when it happened, Ethan said. You were on Earth, but when things fell apart, the Sci-Fi took you. They changed you. They altered your DNA so that you could survive on their world. Elena's heart skipped. I was human, she whispered. It felt so strange to say, like the words didn't belong in her mouth. She had always been Sci-Fi, always known her scales, her claws, her place among her people. The idea of being anything else felt unreal. Ethan paused. Yes, they used technology, biotechnology, to turn you into one of them. A weapon in the war they were fighting with humans. He looked at her, his face full of sadness. But you weren't meant to be a weapon. You were meant to be a diplomat, a bridge between our two worlds. Elena stopped walking, her mind swirling with disbelief. You mean to tell me I was never supposed to be Sci-Fi? Ethan shook his head. No, you were a part of the peace effort, but when everything fell apart, they took you, erased your memories, and made you one of them. They made you believe you were Sci-Fi. They implanted false memories and made you forget your true identity. Elena's heart sank. The thought that everything she had known, everything she had been taught, had been a lie felt like a heavy weight pressing on her chest. False memories. Had all the years she had spent living as a Sci-Fi been nothing more than a fabrication? She didn't know what to think. Why? She asked softly. Why would they do that to me? Why would they make me forget who I really am? Ethan looked at her with empathy in his eyes. The Sci-Fi needed to control you, Elena. They wanted to keep you, keep all of us, under their rule. But they didn't realize that you were stronger than they thought. He paused, watching her closely. You fought back, even when they tried to erase you. You fought for who you really were. Her mind was reeling. She had always known there was something different about her. The strange dreams, the feeling that there was more to her life than just the Sci-Fi world, the echo of something lost. Now it made sense. But even as the pieces started to fall into place, another feeling began to rise within her, anger. Do you know where I came from? Elena asked, her voice stronger now. Do you know where they took me from? Ethan hesitated. I do, but it's not an easy place to find. You were taken far from Earth, from the life you knew. The ship you were on, it crashed on HFY. He glanced at her, sensing the pain in her eyes. I've spent the last 30 years searching for you, Elena. I couldn't leave you behind. I couldn't let you stay there, thinking you were one of them. Elena clenched her fists, the pain and confusion turning into something sharper. How could they do this to me? She wanted to scream, but instead, she held it all inside. She had to focus. There were more answers to find, more truths to uncover. We need to find the ruins, Ethan said, breaking the silence. There's something there, something important. I believe it holds the answers you need. Elena looked at him, unsure. The ruins. Ethan nodded. Yes, there's a place on Sci-Fi 7 that was built long ago, long before the Sci-Fi became what they are now. It's a lost city, hidden deep in the swamp. The information there might help you understand who you were and what happened to you. Despite the weight of her thoughts, Alina knew there was no turning back. She had to know the truth. She had to understand what had been taken from her. With no time to waste, they pushed forward, the dense jungle around them growing thicker and more dangerous. Strange sounds echoed through the trees, and Alina felt a sense of unease creeping up her spine. The swamp was a place of secrets, both natural and unnatural. And the ruins that Ethan spoke of were hidden beneath its thick, murky waters. As they approached the heart of the jungle, the air became thicker, heavier, and the trees grew taller, blocking out most of the sunlight. Alina could feel the weight of the place. It wasn't just a jungle. It felt like the ruins of an ancient world, a place forgotten by time itself. "Stay close," Ethan warned, his voice serious. "This is where things get dangerous." Alina nodded, keeping a careful eye on their surroundings. Her senses were sharper now, more in tune with the world around her than she had ever been before. She could feel the strange energy in the air, the tension that came with being near something ancient and powerful. Soon, they reached the edge of a massive structure, half submerged in the swamp. The walls were made of stone, covered in strange markings that seemed almost alive, shifting in the shadows. "This is it," Ethan said. "The ruins of the lost sky. This is where we find the answers." Alina stepped forward, her heart pounding. She could feel it. This was the place. This was where her past, and perhaps her future, would be revealed. But what she didn't know was that the answers she sought would change everything. The ruins loomed before Alina, the ancient structure half submerged in the swamp's murky waters. Vines and moss covered the stone walls, but the markings carved into the surface still glowed faintly, as though the stones themselves remembered something long forgotten. She could feel the weight of history pressing down on her as she stepped closer. This place held the answers she had been searching for, the answers that might reveal who she truly was. Ethan moved cautiously, his eyes scanning their surroundings. "The Sci-Fi have kept this place hidden for a reason," he said in a low voice. "They don't want anyone to find it, especially you." Alina nodded, her mind racing. What could be hidden here that was so important? She had always thought the Sci-Fi were the rulers of this planet, the ones in control, but now she understood that there was so much more to the story. Her mind kept returning to the image of the human child, the child who had once been her. Alina, she was beginning to believe, was not just her name, but her true self. Ethan led the way into the heart of the ruins, his steps careful and deliberate. The air grew colder as they entered, and Alina could feel the presence of something ancient, something powerful, surrounding them. The walls seemed to whisper, as if the very stone was alive and waiting to reveal its secrets. "We need to be careful," Ethan warned. "This place is old, and the Sci-Fi have sealed away many things here. It's not just history we're dealing with. It's something much more dangerous." The further they walked, the more Alina felt the pull of the place. The memories, once so distant, were beginning to resurface. Alina. That name echoed in her mind again. But it was more than just a name. It was a memory, a life, a past that was hers but had been taken away. The confusion was overwhelming. But the strange, comforting feeling of the ruins made her feel like she was getting closer to the truth. They reached a large chamber deep inside the ruins. It was vast, with towering columns that stretched up toward a ceiling so high it was lost in shadows. In the center of the chamber stood a massive stone pedestal, and upon it rested a glowing orb. The orb pulsed with energy, lighting up the chamber with a faint ethereal glow. "This is it," Ethan said, his voice filled with awe. "This is what I've been searching for." Alina stepped forward, drawn to the orb. She could feel the warmth of it, the energy that seemed to call to her. As she touched the orb, a surge of memories flooded her mind, overwhelming her senses. She saw flashes of her past, a life on Earth, a family she barely remembered, and a ship, the ship that had brought her here to Zifar 7. She saw her younger self, not as a Zifar, but as a human child, playing and laughing. But then there were shadows, dark figures, and the feeling of being torn away from everything she had known. The memories were fragmented, incomplete, but they were real. She wasn't imagining it. She wasn't crazy. She had been human. The Zifar had taken her, erased her memories, and turned her into something she wasn't. But why? What had they wanted from her? As the memories settled, Alina pulled her hand back from the orb. She looked at Ethan, her mind still spinning. "I was a part of a mission," she said, her voice shaky. "I was sent here for peace, to stop the war between humans and the Zifar. But something went wrong, didn't it? That's why I'm here, why they changed me." Ethan nodded slowly. "Yes, you were meant to be the key to peace, Alina. You were supposed to bridge the gap between our two species. But when the war escalated, the Zifar saw you as a tool, something to control. They erased your memories and made you one of them. They wanted to use you as a weapon, to ensure their dominance." Alina clenched her fists, the anger rising inside her once again. She had been nothing more than a pawn in their game. "I wasn't supposed to be their soldier," she said through gritted teeth. "I was supposed to help end the war, but they took everything from me." "They took your past," Ethan said softly. "But they couldn't take who you truly are. You are still Alina. You always have been." Alina felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. It was hard to believe, but deep down, she knew it was true. She had never been fully Zifar. No matter how hard they tried to make her forget, her true self had always been there, hidden beneath the layers of false memories. She turned her attention back to the orb. The glow was fading now, but she could feel it. Something was still there, waiting to be uncovered. "Is there more?" she asked. "Is there something else here that can help me understand why they did this to me?" Ethan looked around the chamber, his eyes narrowing as he searched for something. "There should be more," he muttered. "Something in these ruins holds the answers, but it's hidden. The Zifar have done everything they can to keep it buried." Suddenly, Alina's eyes landed on a series of symbols etched into the walls around the chamber. They were similar to the markings she had seen earlier, but these were different, older, more complex. She stepped closer, feeling an odd pull toward them. "These symbols," she said, tracing them with her eyes. "They're familiar. I've seen them before." Ethan stepped up beside her, his face grim. "These symbols are part of an ancient language. It's the language of the first ones, the beings who built this place long before the Zifar arrived. They knew the truth about the Zifar and about the human mission. If we can decode these symbols, we might be able to unlock the full history of what happened." Alina nodded, her resolve growing stronger. She had come this far, and now she was closer than ever to the truth. The secrets of her past, the answers she needed to understand her life, were within reach. But as she studied the symbols, she could feel something else, a presence. It was as if the ruins themselves were watching her, waiting for her to discover what they had been hiding all these years. "There's more to this place," Alina whispered, her voice filled with a sense of both wonder and fear. "I can feel it. We're getting closer." Ethan nodded, his expression serious. "We have to be careful. The Zifar won't let us get away with this, if they find us here." "They won't find us," Alina said, a fire burning in her chest. "Not if I have anything to say about it." And with that, Alina knew that her journey was just beginning. She was no longer just a lost child of the Zifar. She was Alina, a human who had been stolen, forgotten, and reborn. And she was ready to uncover the rest of the truth, no matter the cost. The chamber was still, the only sound the faint hum of the orb and the distant drip of water. Alina's fingers brushed lightly against the ancient symbols, the language of the first ones. As she traced the lines, a sense of recognition washed over her, like a distant memory that had been locked away for too long. She could feel the weight of the past pressing down on her, urging her to understand. Ethan stood quietly beside her, his eyes focused on the symbols. He knew this was important, that they were standing at the crossroads of something monumental. They had come to the ruins seeking answers, but now the answers were within reach. "Do you think you can translate them?" Elena asked, her voice soft, but full of determination. Ethan nodded. "I've studied the language of the first ones for years. It's difficult, but I can make out some of it. These symbols speak of a powerful force, something that existed before the Sci-Fi came to this planet. It's the key to understanding what happened to you." Elena's heart raced as she leaned in closer, her fingers lightly touching the stone. The more she studied the symbols, the more a strange, familiar feeling surged inside her. She had to focus, to connect the dots. The orb, the markings, the ruins, it all felt like pieces of a puzzle finally coming together. "The first one spoke of an ancient conflict," Ethan continued, his voice low. "They were a peaceful race, but they were wiped out when the Sci-Fi came to the planet. They warned that the Sci-Fi would use their technology to manipulate and control others, just like they did with you." Elena's eyes widened. She wasn't just a victim of the Sci-Fi. She was part of a much larger story, a story that stretched far back into the history of this world. Her mind flashed with images of a lost city, of ruins beneath the surface, of ancient machines that once hummed with life. "They used me," Elena whispered, a spark of anger igniting inside her. "I was a tool, a weapon for their war, but I wasn't supposed to be." Ethan turned to her, his expression somber. "No, Elena, you were meant to bring peace, but when things went wrong, they used you as a weapon. They stole your memories and turned you into something you weren't. You've been living a lie." Elena closed her eyes, trying to push back the flood of emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. The Zephyr had taken so much from her, her humanity, her memories, her past. But they couldn't take who she was, not truly. She was more than just a tool for war. She was Elena, and she would find the truth. "I need to know more," she said, opening her eyes and meeting Ethan's gaze. "I need to understand what they did to me." Ethan's eyes softened with understanding. "The first ones created something here, something that could stop the Sci-Fi from using you, from controlling you. But it's hidden, buried deep within the ruins. If we can find it, we might be able to restore your memories and end this." Elena felt a sense of urgency rising inside her. She had to find it. She couldn't live with the uncertainty, the confusion any longer. The past was calling to her, and she wouldn't stop until she had the answers. They continued their search, moving deeper into the heart of the ruins. The walls seemed to close in around them, the air growing thicker with each step. Elena's senses were on edge. She could feel the presence of something ancient, something powerful. She wasn't sure what it was, but it was guiding her, pulling her toward something. Suddenly, they came to a door, an entrance hidden behind a wall of vines. The door was old, but it was unlike anything Elena had seen before. It was covered in the same symbols they had found earlier, but these ones seemed to pulse with a faint energy. The markings were more intricate here, almost alive, shifting and changing as though they were meant to be understood by only a few. "This is it," Ethan said, his voice tense. "This is the door to what we're looking for." Elena stepped forward, her heart pounding. She could feel it. This was the key. She didn't know how, but she just knew. The symbols on the door seemed to react to her presence, glowing brighter as she neared. She reached out, her hand brushing against the surface of the stone, and immediately, the door began to open with a low, rumbling sound. Inside was a chamber unlike any they had seen before. It was vast and circular, with a glowing crystal at the center. The air was thick with energy, and Elena could feel the power radiating from it. She approached slowly, her eyes fixed on the crystal. It was beautiful, its glow shimmering like liquid light. "This is it," Ethan whispered, awe in his voice. "The heart of the first one's power. They used it to create the technology that allowed them to travel between worlds, to communicate with other civilizations. It's also the key to restoring your memories." Elena stepped forward, Drawn to the crystal, she could feel the warmth of it, the hum of energy beneath her fingertips. As her hand made contact, a surge of power flooded through her. And once again, the memories came rushing back. She saw herself as a child again, back on Earth, with her family. She was happy, carefree, and loved. Then came the day when the Sci-Fi ship landed, the day when everything changed. She saw the experiments, the pain, the loss of her humanity. She saw the memories that had been stolen from her, erased by the Sci-Fi. But there was more. There were memories of something else, something powerful. She had been more than just a diplomat. She had been a protector, someone chosen to carry a weapon that could change the course of the war between the Zephyr and the humans. Alina pulled her hand back from the crystal, gasping for breath. She was no longer confused. She knew who she was. She knew why she had been brought here. The Zephyr had tried to erase her past, but they had failed. She was Alina, and she was ready to take back what was hers. "We have to stop them," she said, her voice steady now, filled with purpose. Ethan nodded, his eyes filled with determination. "We will. Together." And with that, Alina knew that the fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. Alina stood still, her fingers trembling as she pulled away from the glowing crystal. The memories, the truth of who she really was, rushed through her mind like a flood. Her humanity had been stolen, her past erased, but now it was all coming back. She was no longer the lizard-like creature the Sci-Fi had made her believe she was. She was Alina. Ethan stood beside her, watching her closely, knowing the weight of what had just happened. The crystal had unlocked more than just memories. It had unlocked the person Alina had always been, the person the Sci-Fi had tried so desperately to bury. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, his voice full of concern. Alina took a deep breath, steadying herself. The pain, the confusion, the anger, all of it was still there, but now it had a purpose. "I'm more than okay," she said quietly, her voice stronger than before. "I know who I am, and I know what I have to do." Ethan nodded, a look of resolve on his face. "We need to stop the Sci-Fi, Alina. They won't let us get away with what we've discovered. They'll come after us, and if we don't act quickly, they'll use everything they've learned to destroy everything we've worked for." Alina's heart raced as she thought about the Sci-Fi. They had stolen her past, twisted her into something she wasn't, and manipulated her for their own gain. But they didn't know what they had awakened. She wasn't just a tool anymore. She was a force, one that could change everything. "We can't let them win," she said firmly, her voice filled with determination. "We have to stop them, no matter what it takes." Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression serious. "We'll need to find their main base. The Sci-Fi's leaders are there, and if we can take them down, we can finally end their control over this planet. And over you." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The path ahead was dangerous, and the stakes were higher than ever. But Alina knew it was the only choice. She had to confront the Sci-Fi, face the leaders who had used her as a weapon, and reclaim the life they had stolen from her. "We're ready," Alina said, her voice unwavering. With one final glance at the glowing crystal, they left the chamber, the weight of their mission pressing down on them. The ruins that had once hidden the secrets of her past now stood as a reminder of the power she held, power that could bring an end to the Sci-Fi's reign. The journey through the ruins was long and treacherous. The walls seemed to close in around them as they made their way back to the surface, the air thick with the energy of the ancient place. Alina could feel the power of the first ones still lingering in the air, their legacy alive in the ruins they had left behind. As they neared the exit, a sudden sound echoed through the chamber, a low, rumbling growl. Alina's senses went on high alert. She spun around, her eyes scanning the shadows, looking for the source of the noise. "Stay alert," Ethan whispered. "Something's coming." Before Alina could respond, the ground shook, and the walls trembled. A massive shadow moved in the darkness ahead, its form large and ominous. Alina's heart pounded in her chest as she took a step forward, her hand reaching for the weapon she had recovered earlier, the weapon that had been meant for her. A figure emerged from the shadows, a Sci-Fi warrior, tall and imposing, with sharp reptilian features, its glowing eyes locked onto Alina, and a cold smile spread across its face. "You think you can stop us?" The warrior sneered. "You, who have forgotten everything. You are nothing but a tool, a weapon." Alina's grip tightened on the weapon. "I'm not your weapon anymore," she said, her voice filled with quiet fury. "I'm Alina, and you'll never control me again." The Sci-Fi warrior stepped forward, its claws clicking against the stone floor. "You are nothing," it spat. "Just a lost little girl with false memories. You think you can stop the might of the Sci-Fi?" Alina's eyes flashed with anger. She had spent years living under the Sci-Fi's control, but now she knew who she was. She wasn't some helpless pawn in their game. She was a force to be reckoned with, and she wasn't afraid. With a swift motion, Alina raised her weapon, the energy from the first ones coursing through it. The weapon hummed with power, glowing brightly as it absorbed the energy around them. Without hesitation, she fired. The blast hit the Sci-Fi warrior directly in the chest, sending it crashing to the ground with a deafening roar. The warrior struggled to stand, its glowing eyes filled with rage. But it was clear that it was no match for Alina's newfound strength. The Sci-Fi had underestimated her, just as they had underestimated humanity. "Alina," Ethan said softly, his voice filled with awe. "You did it." Alina turned to him, her face determined but calm. "We're not done yet. We still have to stop these Sci-Fi leaders." They quickly made their way out of the ruins, the threat of the Sci-Fi warrior still looming behind them. Alina could feel the adrenaline pumping through her veins, her focus sharper than ever. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for the future of both humans and Sci-Fi, to end the cycle of manipulation and violence that had plagued both races. The journey to the Sci-Fi's main base was treacherous, but Alina's resolve only grew stronger with every step. She would face the leaders of the Sci-Fi, and she would stop them from controlling her and the world any longer. As they approached the base, the massive structure loomed in the distance, an imposing fortress of steel and stone. Alina could feel the weight of her mission ahead, but she was ready. She had the power, the strength, and the will to fight for her freedom. "We do this together," she said to Ethan, her voice steady. Ethan smiled, his eyes filled with determination. Together. And with that, they moved toward the final battle, the fate of both worlds hanging in the balance. The Sci-Fi base loomed before them, a massive fortress of dark metal and pulsating energy. The sky above crackled with storm clouds, illuminated by streaks of lightning, as if the universe itself was watching this final battle unfold. Alina took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything that had led to this moment. She was no longer lost. She was no longer confused about who she was. She was human. She was Alina. And she was ready to fight. Beside her, Ethan checked his equipment, his eyes sharp and focused. "This is it," he said. "Are you ready?" Alina nodded, more than ever. They moved cautiously toward the entrance, the wind howling around them. The base was heavily guarded, but they had planned for this. Using the knowledge stored in the ancient ruins, they had discovered a secret pathway, one the Sci-Fi had overlooked. They slipped through the hidden tunnel, their footsteps silent as they made their way deeper into the stronghold. The air was thick with tension. Every shadow could hide an enemy. Every corner could be a trap. But they pressed on, their determination unshaken. As they neared the central control room, a deep voice echoed through the halls. "You should not have come, Alina." Alina froze. She knew that voice. Commander Hyrax, the Sci-Fi leader who had erased her memories, who had turned her into a tool for their war. Slowly, she and Ethan stepped into the large chamber ahead. At its center stood Hyrax, towering over them, his reptilian form covered in shimmering armor. His glowing yellow eyes locked onto Elena with an almost amused expression. "You have always been our greatest weapon," HFY said, his voice calm yet full of menace. "And now you will return to your true purpose." Elena clenched her fists. "No, you stole my past. You tried to make me something I'm not. But I remember now. I am not yours to control." HFY sighed, shaking his head. "You were meant to lead us, meant to bring order to this chaotic world. And yet, you choose to side with the weak." Ethan stepped forward, raising his weapon. "She chooses freedom." HFY let out a low growl. "Then you leave me no choice." With a wave of his clawed hand, alarms blared through the fortress. Doors slammed shut. Traps were activated. The room shook as mechanical sentries emerged from the walls, their glowing red eyes scanning for targets. "Elena, get to the control panel," Ethan shouted, firing at the sentries. "Shut it all down." Elena sprinted toward the control console, dodging blasts of energy as HFY lunged at her. She barely managed to roll aside, her heart pounding. "You cannot escape what you are," HFY roared, slashing at her with his claws. Elena blocked with her weapon, sparks flying as metal clashed. "I know exactly what I am," she growled, "and it's not what you made me." She kicked off the ground, using the power of the First One's weapon to propel herself forward. With a swift motion, she struck HFY, sending him staggering back. Meanwhile, Ethan was holding off the sentries, his weapon overheating as he fired round after round. "Elena, now would be a great time to shut that thing down." Elena reached the control panel and quickly scanned the ancient symbols. This was it, the heart of the Scifi's control system. If she could deactivate it, she could stop their war machines and end their rule over the planet. HFY roared in anger and charged at her, but this time, Elena was faster. She slammed her hand against the activation panel, sending a surge of energy through the system. The room shook violently. The red warning lights flickered. The sentries froze in place. HFY's eyes widened. "What have you done?" Elena turned to face him, standing tall. "I ended your war." HFY snarled and lunged at her one last time. But Elena was ready. With a final powerful strike, she blasted him backward, sending him crashing into the console. Sparks erupted as the system overloaded, sending shockwaves through the fortress. "Ethan, we need to get out of here," Elena shouted. Ethan ran to her side, nodding. "Agreed." They raced through the collapsing halls as explosions rocked the base. The storm outside had grown fiercer, the winds howling as if celebrating the end of the Scifi's tyranny. Finally, they reached the exit, just as the fortress imploded behind them, sending debris flying in every direction. They barely made it to safety as the entire structure collapsed into the earth. For a long moment, there was silence. Only the sound of the wind remained. Ethan let out a breath and turned to Elena, a grin on his face. "Well, that was intense." Elena chuckled, shaking her head. "Yeah, but it's over now." She looked up at the sky, the first hints of dawn breaking through the storm. The Scifi were finished. Their control was broken, and she was finally free. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. "So, what now?" Elena smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. "Now, we rebuild. We help those who suffered under the Sci-Fi, and we make sure this never happens again." Ethan nodded. "Sounds like a plan." As the sun rose over the horizon, Elena walked forward, not as a lost girl, not as a weapon, but as herself. For the first time in 30 years, she knew exactly who she was. And nothing, not the Sci-Fi, not the past, not even the memories they had stolen, could take that away from her ever again.